You are a Syrian. You came to Europe as a refugee 10 years ago. Let's dive right into it.
I think 48 people were on the boat. Everybody was like reading the Quran, God, Allah, I was like just sitting there, dude. It's insane, dude. It's insane. It's an insane feeling.
If you were to bring 1 million people from Syria, many of them suffering PTSD, then generally speaking, that would make the country that they come to less safe.
Especially in the form that happened.
How many Islamists do you think came through human trafficking channels into Germany and Europe?
Oh, a lot. They took on a big bet. Like, how can you imagine just letting in that fashion so many people in a country and expect things to just actually things went very well considering what happened and the result. Actually, relatively speaking, things went way too well.
You did cross multiple safe countries.
100%.
I don't think, and I know this might sound cruel, I don't think Europe has any duty whatsoever towards Syrians.
100%. I also don't think that.
Relations are being normalized. Is it not time for Syrians to go home? You would be a supporter of having restrictive immigration policies?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Except for yourself.
So you either change the people or you change the place. The Islam gehört Deutschland. Islam belongs to Germany. They do lack a lot of knowledge about Islam. But I do understand why politicians say it, because basically their job is to kind of maintain social peace and not necessarily, trigger some more social conflicts. Islam is not meant to, it has to be the superior power in the country, in the state. It can only tolerate being basically a submissive power for for strategic purposes until you are strong enough.
So do you think that inviting Syrians into Germany was a mistake?
See, when I arrived at the German border, I wanted to close the door behind me and say, we're full.
Afghans are very high up there when it comes to sexual violence. And unfortunately, you're Syrian, there is an overrepresentation of Syrians.
Yeah, we're doing quite well on that ranking.
How does that make you feel? My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad24, and today I have a very special guest, ABD, who is one of the new Germans.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the right way to describe you.
On paper, yeah.
No, ABD, you are a Syrian. You came to Europe as a refugee 10 years ago. Let's dive right into it. Tell me the story of you're growing up in Syria, you're 21, 2015 comes, Angela Merkel declares Verschaffen das and invites Syrians to come to Germany. What's the context behind all of this? What does your life look like before you make the move? What made you move?
Well, essentially, after the start of the Syrian revolution, as it started as a peaceful civil rights movement in 2011, it was basically just a normal reaction from any dictatorship. They're gonna start shooting people, and that happened a lot. That happened on many demonstrations where I was, and I have seen many people actually just getting shot right in front of me. As the conflict progressed, the people on demonstrations, they started to try to protect their demonstrations. They were some of the army personnel, the police, the security services, they were refusing to shoot, and they were forming their own groups, and then they were starting to protect the demonstrations, and that's how the Free Army was formed in Syria. And that triggered an even larger response. Basically, that's where the actual Syrian army, the formal Syrian army, started marching through the streets. And yeah, they weren't very successful because they were being constantly ambushed. They were not wanted. They were not supported by the Syrians. Yeah, that basically triggered the army to need more personnel. And then when the drafting happened. In Syria, whenever you're 18, you get the military book. It's basically the mandatory military service. And yeah, when you get that, you have 1 year. So by 19, you will have to do your mandatory military service. If you're studying, if you are basically the sole supporter of your family, you can basically delay that. And that's what happened to me basically when I was 19. I was, because my dad has died by then. And then I was basically using that as an excuse to be supporting my family. And I couldn't push it any further because you have limits.
Sure.
As my younger brother, he was getting old enough to basically also claim to be the supporter, and then I would have to be drafted. During that time, being drafted is literally putting a cut to your life, because the established military personnel and the security personnel, whenever they have the new recruits, they will just basically send them to the front line. And there was a lot of demand, what's happening right now in Russia and Ukraine. there is a lot of demand for new recruits, and those who are more experienced, they will just like basically send them to the front line. And it was a very common thing. Whenever you hear somebody, well, the son of this guy or whatever, do you know that guy? Yeah, he was drafted. And you just like hear a month later, well, he's dead, basically. So it was a very common pattern. And that explains a lot why, I don't know why this never comes up in the debates, why there is so many young men coming to Europe, especially in 2015, and not young women. And that's because you don't leave unless you absolutely have to. Like, it's not a fun journey. It's literally, basically, you're going from an absolute death to a possible death when you take on the journey to leave Syria. And I basically, just like packed my stuff, shut down the business, shut down everything, and basically,
How did that journey look? So just for context, you're from a city called Hama.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a city in the middle west of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have two options. You either leave to Lebanon,
okay,
which is dangerous because as the security forces controlling you and they see you leaving to that direction, they know you're not coming back, so they might arrest you and they just like basically send you again to the front line. Or you just leave illegally. Basically, you go leaving through the rebel areas, and then from there you cross to Turkey. And the funny thing is, basically, in Syria back in that time, when you were under the control of the Assad's territory, they would control your phone on every checkpoint. There were like hundreds of checkpoints, like literally on every like roundabout and every square there was like checkpoints. And they would control your phone to see, basically, are you like a supporter of Assad? Have you been on demonstrations? Did you film anything or whatever? And my phone was, even though I went on every single demonstration, my phone was full of songs and support stuff like for Assad and his pictures. Just like when they control me and they look on my phone, it's like, it's one of like, our body,
Yeah.
And so when you're leaving to the rebels areas, you need to reset, basically. You need to delete all of the stuff. And on my military passport, you have like a military passport, that's what you get, where they document all the services that you've done, why you're not yet in the service, and so on. I had also a sticker of Assad on, and he was like basically waving, and we say like there was a word, "We love you." So I deleted all of my phone, I cleaned up everything, and I basically cut through connections. You could pass from the Assad's territory to the rebels' territory like safely, because there was still some commerce going on, and there was like some local agreements between both sides. Okay, we're gonna let trucks pass, only to get like the commerce going, like the necessary commerce. So I got on one of those trucks through connections as if I would be an employee, and I just went out of the Assad's territory, and then came the first checkpoint of the rebels. And back then was the Nusra, which was led by the current president, al-Shara. They got my ID, they got the military book to see if I was in service, basically for Assad, whatever, and they open it and they see, the first thing they see that I forgot is the sticker showing Assad waving and saying, "We love you." And he was like, "All right, calm down." And everybody was looking like, in the truck, we were like 3 people. I was like, "Why calm down? It's never happened, like there's an agreement." I was like, damn, I forgot the sticker of the president on my military book. If they think that you are an agent of the government, the classic way of killing you, bro, they will just put you against the wall and they will take an RPG and will just shoot it against you, so nothing would be left from your body. And this happened like many times. So I get down from the truck, bro, and that was like I was like just looking around me, and I was like, this is the end. I got out of there, and there was like this guy sitting, and behind him they had hidden the like an anti-aircraft machine gun, basically placed on a pickup truck. And they put it inside a shop. Basically, they just drove it back in a shop so it's not visible for aircraft. And he was sitting in front of it, and he's having his walkie-talkies. He had a beard like that. He was like basically from the Nusra. He was like one of the al-Shara's guys, And so I got out, and I thought like I'm dead anyway. So I was like, I said just like show some personality then. Just bluff, I was like, it's because of the photo. And he was like, no, it's not because of the photo. He was like being sarcastic with me. In that second, dude, I was basically speaking normal, but literally my knees, they were not like they didn't have the force to hold me. And it was like just the end of the life, I just stepped towards him and I told him, yeah, you're sitting here, you don't care about anything, but we are there, we are being oppressed by the government or whatever, we have to do that. So I explained that to him. And then he saw that my hair was like cut unevenly. And then some like radical Islamists think this is also not right. That's why you see them all have this long hair, all evenly grown, because basically in some hadith from Muhammad, it says it's like this is the right way to do it. And I was like, no, it's not the right way to do it, because we have our scientists, we have our sheikhs who tell us how to do it. And those are our references. So I basically argued with him with a classic way of arguing in Islam. We say we have our own references and we are obliged to follow them. And then he took out the sticker, bro, and he smashed it on the table, and he was like, this is the president of all of us. I was like basically being sarcastic. And then he gave me my ID back and he gave me the book and he was like, you can go. And dude, this was the second, dude, I was literally like, I was born again. I was like 21. I was like, basically it's like year one.
And then what happens next? You're in rebel controlled territory and then you go to Turkey.
Exactly. So on the way there, so basically you have to get Smuggler. We had the first attempt in Turkey. We got caught by the Turkish army during the night, dude. So you have to like go up and down the mountains. Those were the first hikes in my life. Yeah, during the night, you just hear something is moving, dude. Like we're like all side, we're about 50 people. And out of the sudden, it's like, boom, like he shot in the air, the soldier. And then a bunch of soldiers came out of and they took us to a place. They held us there, dude, and they treated us like horribly, the Turkish army. They stole our stuff and they kept us in open air for 2 days in the mountains, dude, in the cold. And after that, they sent us back to Syria. And literally, dude, I am coming down like it was like a downhill mountain, terrain. And the smuggler was waiting for me and I just grabbed 2 apples. And the smuggler said, I was like eating the apples and I took a piss and the smuggler said, okay, there's another group, we're going to try again. Dude, it's like, I didn't even stop for a second in Syria. I was like, all right. And I just like went with another group and then entered Turkey again. And then I entered Turkey. Then I was like successful the second attempt.
And how much did this cost?
It wasn't much. Actually, entering Turkey during that time wasn't that much. But I do know that in the recent years, it had gotten like around $2-3K.
So you had cash on you?
Yeah. So basically, I had the family savings. They were $1,500. And I had them literally sticked like between my legs, like behind my balls. So I had them like wrapped in a plastic bag. And then I had them sticked like with basically a bandage up my balls, to just because I know they will be searching you, they will be stealing from you, whether it's like from the government side, whatever side. And that was like basically the safest place. So you just leave some cash on the side.
And then you traveled through Turkey.
Exactly. And then you arrive basically you go through the Turkish cities, and then you have to basically, the meeting point was Izmir. Mm-hmm. It was like the square in Izmir. There was like a mosque there. And when I arrived there, we met the smuggler. It's like a horrible network, bro. Like
these were Turks?
The Turks and Syrians. I mean, the ones who are running the background were Turks, but the actual, like the people you have contact with, they are just Syrian. Like, Syrians, and they're like just working for them just for the sake of the language. So basically you have an office where you can go, I left $1,100 for the smuggler and $50 for the office. It basically, and they give you a secret code. When you arrive in Europe, that secret code, you can give it to the smuggler so that he can pick up the money. That was basically the PayPal of things, like that was like the buyer protection going on.
I said that the code would allow the person on the receiving end to be paid for having successessily smuggled you across.
Exactly, and you only give him the code when you're
like a Bitcoin key.
That was like the token, 100%.
Do you remember what the password was?
No.
No.
And it was like proper. They had an office like here, bro. You just enter, you had to stand in line, whatever, and then you just like hand them over $1,100.50, and then they give you just a little piece of paper and say, "Is your number," and that's it.
Wow.
And they confirm with the smuggler, he left us the money. And then during the night, dude, they come and one of those vans that they don't have windows, blacked out.
Yeah.
And it would just like stack about 30 people inside, bro. Like as many as they can fit. and they will just take you to the coast. Like,
And it was mostly men. Who was
there
who
were
was with you
women, kids,
in
bro.
the van?
Like, yeah,
It
yeah,
was
they were
you-
like
so you was
women.
you and 30 people in a van, and they drove you to the coast.
Exactly, dude. And then basically they leave you out on some area like on the coast, and then you have to hike, and then you arrive at the like a meeting point, and this is the meeting point or the collection point where all the smugglers are sending their people. So it looked very organized in a sense. Basically, yeah, they knew what they were doing, and we had to stay there, and then we had to wait for the boats to arrive. So those like 9-meter boats, they are I think meant for 12 people or 14. And they were stacking about 50 people on those boats. And our boat, we thought it's gonna arrive like in a few hours, but it took us 2 days, and we're like just out in the open air, dude.
Just waiting.
Yeah, just waiting in the cold, dude. It was like Turkey is a lot colder than Syria. Like I was not prepared, and the Turkish army stole my bag, and I had nothing. It had only the money that was between my balls, and that's it. That I had nothing, dude. I was literally all the time with like my shoes, my like basically shorts, and my t-shirt. That's it. And we were getting mad at the smugglers, like, dude, we need to move. We're cold, blah blah. And someone just like pulled out his weapon on us, and he started shooting in the air. And it's like,
Wow.
you have to wait, you know. They didn't care, dude. They didn't care. Like if you would get shot there, like nobody would care. Like the Turkish police was turning like an eye on them. Obviously, it was very clear. It was like a huge amount of people. So if the Turkish police would have wanted to prevent it, it would have been like super easy. We waited, and then we had the luck, dude, of our group, of our boat, that usually the boats they sink because
They're overloaded. Because there's too many people on them.
There is too many people, and the guy who's driving them is not really specialized. So the deal was, whoever drives the boat, he can go on for free if he knows how to drive the boat. So just that they could get the people on the other side. And those were not few. Like, I don't know, steering a boat that is not meant for that, and you've never steered a boat like that. It was a rare currency to find this person.
And you were lucky.
And was very lucky. That was some guy whose name was Muhammad. He was like from the Syrian coast, and he drove boats all of his life. And he was like, guys, don't worry, easy. And that's how basically the trip that's supposed to, it was like I think about 12 kilometers.
Yeah.
It takes about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It takes several hours. Sometimes they get rescued by the Coast Guard or whatever, because they start ending up like in the sea, spinning in circles because they don't know how to steer the boat. Especially with so many people. So we caught on it, dude. And up to that point, dude, I was like thinking, all right, you think you're just like playing out scenarios. What happened if the boat, because about over 4,250 people died on this route, like drowning. And I was like thinking, what would happen if somebody, if like, will I be trying to help people? Will I be trying to do anything? I was like, all the ideas like, no, you don't try to help, you just survive, because otherwise you will die as well. That was basically the protocol if something happens. And luckily enough, it took us 45 minutes. That was the most chilled part of the whole journey, the boat journey. Like about, I think 48 people were on the boat. And everybody was like reading the Quran, God, Allah, and I was like just sitting there, dude. It's like, it's insane, dude. It's insane. It's an insane feeling. And you kind of like get paralyzed in that moment, like mentally, intellectually. You kind of like don't process things. You're just like basically in blackout mode until we arrived in Greece, and we had the first step in Europe. Yeah, with every one of us stepping in was like an additional problem for you.
In Europe, you knew you wanted to go to Germany?
No. So the reason why I didn't stay in Turkey, because I knew that Turkey had too many Syrians, and that will become a problem at some point. And I didn't want to go to Germany because I knew that too many people are going to Germany. That's going to become a problem at some point. So my goal was to go to Sweden. So basically you arrived in Greece, and there was like, I don't know, if 2015, there was like this huge issue of thousands of Syrians basically, or migrants, generally refugees, being trapped on the island.
Sure.
And that was because they couldn't get a paper. And that paper to say, okay, I entered the country, I'm registered, and then you can carry on with this paper to take the ferry to Athens. And
so you were stuck on Lesbos?
Yeah, they were not allowed to take you in a taxi, or not like non-civilian. Nobody would take you in their car, because otherwise it's smuggling. Basically, there would be like some serious legal offense. So we had to walk from the point where the boat dropped us to the actual city of the island, about 60 kilometers by foot. with the kids. And during the night, some of the people of the island, they were coming like at 2 a.m. people, like, and they were carrying the people with kids. They were trying to help because it was a horrible, horrible walk, dude. Like, you were not prepared. You didn't have like your trail shoes on with your Gore-Tex jackets and, all the protective gear that you can have. No, dude, it was like a very horrible experience, especially with the kids. So we arrived there and there was about a queue of 15,000 people wait for this paper. So what they did, they started employing just whoever, and they were like just basically, because of the chaos of the situation, there was the registration was, some guy takes your passport. They were sitting like on a football field, and they had like several tables, like I think 25 tables or something, and just like get the people and just like look at it and just write whatever he can read from your name, and he signs it and he gives it back to you. And they said that was the registration in Europe. And with that paper, you could go on the ferry and you can cross to Athens. And yeah, bro, you arrive in Athens. That was like not very spectacular. You go on to the Macedonian border. And from there, you had...
So you walked? You walked across Greece?
No, because you did have the paper, you could take a taxi.
Okay.
And by that time, actually, when we arrived in Athens, we had like the group has formed, and we took a bus to the Macedonian border. And they were basically, I was leading this group because I was the only one who was able to communicate, in English. So we arrived at the Macedonian border, and then you had options. Basically, you either go for €5 with the train, which is going to take time. You pay €10 for the bus, and I think, I don't know how much, like 20 or 30 euros for a taxi to kind of cross to Serbia. And we did that. And when we were in Serbia, there was also another huge line for registration. And the Serbians, they were like more strict on security. The Serbians, they were very concerned. And they were basically, there was like some border control guards. They had some devices. We were passing through the devices just to see that nobody was armed. And then there was like basically a big facility where the United Nations was there. And there were registrations going on. They were checking you medically and so on. But to enter that facility, bro, and the Serbian called, you had to wait 15 hours in line. And that was the only time in my life when I saw people sleeping, standing. By the time we have entered, we got registered in Serbia. Yeah, basically you could take on the taxi. You go to Belgrade, I believe. Yeah, to the main city. And from there on, you go to Hungary. And in Hungary, I don't know if you remember, but in 2015, a law came into force, which was, I think, around the 15th, 16th of September, which said everybody crosses the border illegally will be going to jail for about 3 years or something. That's still have it in mind. So yeah, dude, Hungary was not so friendly. They had like the border fence, and everybody was like talking in a group. Hungary is going to be a tough one to cross. Hungary is going to be a tough one to cross. Some people were destroying the papers. Some people were throwing away their passports and so on because they didn't want Hungary to register them in Hungary, because then you're stuck in Hungary. And we tried to trick the border control dude, but they caught us. And he was like, we're like trying to find a way through the fence, and out of the sudden, like a jeep shows up with like some guys with guns, and they were like, and yeah, dude, and they were like, they were unfriendly, 100%. And they took us to a help point that was set by the Red Cross of Austria, where they were basically providing assistance, food, and so on. And they told us, you're lucky that they brought you here, because they are not, mistreating people only because we are here and we have like cameras and stuff. And after that, they called us like to a big camp where they were collecting everyone. And that camp was like just basically like a bunch of tents where people can sleep. And like basically the tents that didn't have a ground. And it was basically one night before this law come into force when we arrived. So we had basically, it was like 24 hours before that. So we arrived at night to that camp. And the plan for them was to free that camp before this law come into force. And I was like very lucky. So the next day they put us all on a train and they sent us all the way to Austria, just like nonstop. And we got out in Austria. In Austria, then things were very different. Yeah, the treatment was a lot friendlier. Yeah, you could see that when you enter Austria, and Germany, that there was like a welcoming culture. There was like there was like mobilizing a massive amount of people to help.
Final destination, ordinary German men and women stood here and applauding them. Extraordinary. People handing them water. Welcome to Germany. How do you feel?
And then we arrived in Vienna, and Vienna basically, by that time, Germany has shut down its border because there were so many people coming in. Germany did have like basically a brief phase of closing the border during that time. And we were just stuck in Vienna. We couldn't take the train to Germany because the Germans said, all right, if they are not Europeans, just like don't get them on the train, don't give them tickets. So the Austrian army, the Bundesheer, they picked us up from the Vienna train station, and they took us all the way to Salzburg, I think.
Oh, it was Salzburg.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a city in Austria.
And here, dude, like I said, you do notice that. So when we arrived in this area, so basically they prepared a kind of parking space for us to stay. And literally, dude, as you're going out, there were like tents set by the Red Cross, Austrian Red Cross. A bunch of people were waiting to help. They were like standing in line, basically as you are basically just to point to you how you enter, like unnecessarily. Like there was like a massive amount of people there to help. And so we entered in that place. We stayed there for 2 days until Germany opened the border, and then we got on the train. And also when we arrived in Germany, dude, when we got in the train station in Munich, basically when they were taking just like your fingerprint, the security fingerprint. And here were also like massive amounts of people, like Germans trying to help, providing food, advice, whatever. Also medical attention, hundreds of flats. And they're just like basically sending people into those flats. And they asked you just wait there. You had basically everything. You had like food, shelter, and medical attention. But I didn't want to stay in Germany because there were so many people, dude. Like there were all of these houses, they were full so quickly, dude. Like there was, I'm not sure like how many people were arriving every day. Like I think like quite 10,000 or something, dude. Can you imagine that? Like just crossing the sea every day. It's crazy. And all of them wanted to go to Germany. And it was obvious that that's going to become a problem. So what I did, I took the train, went all the way to the north of Germany, to Rostock, took the ferry. And here, dude, when I was left for about like, I think I was like, had like 80 euros out of $1,400, dude. That was like the money I had left. So you arrive in Sweden, they take you on, they register you, and they send you all the way to Boden. It's about 1,500 kilometers in the north, whereas there's nothing. And they put you in a camp, basically where you have shelter, food, and everything, but you literally do everything you can do, you can imagine you will be doing there for the rest of your life. It's just eating and sleeping. It was in the rush hour of the city, you can get on the bus and you're alone. Literally like a big bus, you get on. It was like there for 5 days, and I was like, I have to go back. I'm not going to stay in Sweden. This is where things have changed, because I already saw myself being depressed there. And yeah, I didn't have money to return. It was like having like about 70 euros or something in my pocket. It was like the tickets, they were like bloody expensive. So I was like, dude, like you're gonna have to jump on the train and deal with the problems later, you know? So the intention was to go to the Netherlands. And I jumped on the train, arrived in Stockholm, stayed there overnight, and then took another train. So the train from Boden to Stockholm, I didn't pay basically. And I was like, basically, yeah, the guy, the controller was like super mad. And then everybody in the train, he was like, yeah, okay, chill, you know, what's up, you know? And so, yeah, dude, I arrived back in Stockholm, took the another train to Malmo. And then Malmo would take the ferry back to Germany so you can pass to. And as we're getting out of the ferry, so what they do, they put you in a bus and they drive you basically out of the port to the basically stopping point of the station. And dude, our bus, we drove out, and out of the sudden, German police car stands in front, another one in the back. And I was like sitting in the front. I was like probably me and another guy, we spoke English. And there was like a very funny situation, sarcastic situation, because the police, basically, the guy in charge, he came in the bus and he was like, hi, welcome to Germany. I was like, hi. I was like, your passport, please. And I gave him my passport, and he just looked at it and I was like, where's your visa? And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, you're entering Germany. It's a country. This is the border control. Where's your visa? And I was like, yeah, I'm from Syria. And I was like, yeah, you're welcome, but you need a visa to enter Germany. I was like, yeah, but I'm a refugee. I was like, you're a refugee. But the refugee looks for like a safe place to stay, right? He was like, there is warrants here, right? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, you went to Greece, it's a safe place. You were in Turkey, it's a safe place. And he was like, are you a refugee or on a vacation? Are you like doing a road trip across Europe? And he was like saying that smiling because he knew what's up, you know? And yeah, he said, well, I will give you your passport back later. So they took us, they were just out in Germany, and then we got the Dublin fingerprint. And whenever you've done that, dude, it's over. You are stuck in the country. Nothing can get you out of there. Wherever you go in any other country, this is what's happening right now. Basically, those who have had their Dublin fingerprint in Poland, they're being sent back. That was like the law. And that's how Germany forced me to stay in Germany.
But do you not think that he had a good point? You did cross multiple safe countries.
100%. I do think that if you were looking for safety, just for the sake of saving your life, you would have like just crossing the Syrian border, that would have done it. That would have been totally sufficient. But since you are already in a momentum of basically, getting out of from a very dangerous place where, like there is like quite a few life decisions that you would make. And one of them is not only looking at your safety, but also to make the decision where you're going to stay for the rest of your life. That is a very important detail.
But is the plan for refugees not to return home once Syria is safe? Because now it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? And Assad is no longer in power. Al-Shara has been recognized by the United States of America. Relations are being normalized. Is it not time for Syrians to go home?
For now, no. But I do believe that for the... I do think that when things stabilize even more, those Syrians that they don't feel compatible with the culture in Europe, wherever they are, I do think that it's not only time for them to go back home. I do think that they should be sent back home. Those who don't work, who basically live on social welfare. Fairly speaking, in Germany, I think Germans have done a lot to help out. So let's say if you talk about the 80s when the Gastarbeiter from Turkey
guest workers.
Exactly, the guest workers came to Germany. There was like an integration issue because those guest workers, they were basically working the entire day. They were not having any connection with the society, and then will just go back home and crawl into their own, bubble and environment. While right now, I was actually, when I arrived and I took like basically, you go on to the registration and then you tell them, they were like, what do you want to do? Basically in the office where they are the job center. And I was like, I want to work. And I was like, no, we don't want you to work. We want you to learn language and want you to integrate. And that's basically a strategic thing that Germany has changed. And considering that Germany is basically providing you food, shelter, money to spend, plus the ability to learn the language, plus in my case, I was able to continue my education, which I wasn't able to do in Syria. And you still don't make it to like basically the absolute minimum, speaking the language, being able to provide for yourself. I think you should be sent back nicely and for good.
How many Syrians do you reckon actually have integrated into German society and into European society as a percentage, if you had to put a number on it?
I would say in terms of like the basic stuff, basically providing for themselves, language, sufficient language knowledge, or whatever, I would say 70%. And I do think that 30% are still basically just like being a huge drag on the system. And also on this other Syrians who they're like doing their best to kind of integrate, to kind of like, when you're living in the country, that's the thing. You're not only, back to your question, is like, isn't it just looking for safety? But when you're leaving your country and you're coming and you end up in a country like Germany, it's not only your safety that's being changing. It's the projection of your life. Like everything is changing. You're living in an open society, in a free society. It's a rich country. It's like one of the best countries on earth. Like the third largest economy. There's like a bunch of opportunities to have there. And if you still can't make it, or you don't want to make it, or if you're still basically carrying on your culture with you and your beliefs, and you don't want to basically just submit to the existing system, which is a lot better to what you had, I do think it's like better to send you back. Like it's unfair to the people. that they are taking you on. I do think that people should be taken on when they are like in physical danger. But if they refuse to integrate, if they refuse to provide value, it's basically trying to help someone. It's not a lifetime commitment.
But why do you think that European countries have a duty to help refugees? Because I would argue, my line of argument would be that there are some very, very rare cases, right? So for example, there are, the refugees that I would be willing to take on would be, for example, in the case of Poland, it would be Belarusian oppositionists. It's the country next to us. These are people who are risking their lives fighting the Lukashenko regime. It makes sense. We're the country right next to them. Like, I don't think, and I know this might sound cruel, I don't think Europe has any duty whatsoever towards Syrians.
Conflicts are interconnected, and a significant amount why the Syrian conflict has dragged on and has become so deadly and destructive is because basically of geopolitical interests. And I think Europe, basically, if you go back to 2016, Germany has, and I think it's a very interesting aspect, because why did the Germans do that? Did they do it to feel good about themselves, or did they do it because they only wanted to help? Because if they only wanted to help, there was a lot cheaper ways to help. Germany has spent about 20 billion euros on basically all the operations connected to the crisis in 2016. Can you imagine how much that would have done if you would have helped Jordania, if you would have helped Lebanon, if you had helped Turkey, basically taking on more refugees? So I do think that Europe was extremely passive on helping the countries. Like I said, like let's say if today Poland would be basically overrun by another 3 million Ukrainian refugees. If you don't help Poland or the Polish people basically economically to take on that burden, people will end up basically leaking into other countries. And that's what I think Europe was extremely passive, and that would probably include Poland, Germany, and so on. They have ignored the problem in the nearby countries. Would they had the capacity, would have had like probably a lot less problems taking on the Syrian refugees, similar culture, similar language, everything. And the Syrian refugees would have had less problems, because I do believe that many of the Syrian refugees, the process of integration is basically giving part of your identity away. The process of the integration is a very painful process, because then your language is not worthy, your culture is not worthy, your habits not worthy, the way of your communication, the way how you chill or whatever, like the way how you celebrate. For example, in Syria, it's normal to just, if you're like just drive the car around with like loud music. In Germany, it's like being seen as uncivil. So you do give up a lot of things. And the question is, did Germans really want to help? Because I believe there were a lot better ways to help. Or did Germans basically try to kind of like put a point in their history where they did something emotionally humane, good, but economically, but politically a mistake?
So do you think that inviting Syrians into Germany was a mistake?
Politically and economically, yes. It was humanely a very brave thing.
So why would you say that it was politically and economically wrong?
Cultural compatibility between Germany and Syria. So Syria, for the majority, is a Muslim country. And they say in Germany, they say, the Islam gehört zu Deutschland, which means like the Islam belongs to Germany. And I'm like, that's quite an ignorant question. Like it means like they do lack a lot of knowledge about Islam. But I do understand why politicians say it, because basically their job is to kind of maintain social peace and not necessarily, trigger some more social conflicts. The question is for me is like, does Germany in its current form, in its current constitution, belong into the Islam? Like, would you take the German values in constitution? Like, I'm not talking about the technical amendments, whatever, like basically the separation of powers between the states and the federal government. I'm talking about basically the first amendment of the constitution. Basically, the dignity of a human is not touchable. So does that go along with Islam? Does that go along with Islam that people who have no religion can live peacefully, they can express themselves, they can criticize? It's not compatible. So the Islam itself is rejecting Germany. And the issue with the Islam is not meant to basically, in its structure, it's basically, it has to be the superior power in a country, in a state. it can only tolerate being basically a submissive power for like basically for strategic purposes until you are strong enough. But it's not meant to be basically the secondary or like just like a cultural thing. This is not meant like this is not how Islam or the Quran considers Islam. Islam must be basically the religion of the head of the state, the religion of the state. Also, a lot of like the state's actions must be regulated by Islam primarily. So all of that, when you take people that believe in that and you put them in another place, so you either change the people or you change the place. And changing the people, I won't bet much on changing the majority of them. I do think that the majority of Muslims in Germany do live and abide by the constitution, and they do have like the exact values of any other Germans. But I just think it was a big bet in terms of thinking that you can change people by saying integration. That's what Merkel said. She said, "Wir schaffen das." She didn't mean only like taking on the people, but also integrating them into the society. And I think that was quite naive to think that. But on the other hand, it was a very humane thing because, like I said, they didn't only save lives, but they also provided an economic opportunity for each individual.
How many Islamists do you think came through across the human trafficking channels into Germany and Europe?
Oh, a lot. That was actually striking. So as you're leaving Syria, a very important point for you is safety. Like, I have a bunch of insurances. Like, I actually once counted my insurances. I think I have like over 35 insurances because safety in my life is a serious concern, you know. Like, I have like about 5 accident insurances. So whatever is going to happen to me, wherever I am, basically I have like a bunch of entities that I can, write to. And when I had my first interview in Germany, it was basically a very basic interview. And based on that interview, I was provided with the asylum and the residency in Germany, the initial residency, which was like 3 years. And for me, as someone who has lived through like chaos and so on, that did seem to me way too chaotic. Like, I expected the conversation to take more than 5 minutes. I expected to be asked some tricky questions to see, am I Syrian? I actually translated for people when I was in Hungary. We were basically held at the police station for about 1 hour until the buses will come and pick us up. And then we were asked by the police who speaks English. And then I stood up and then I went and I translated for guys. I don't know where they came from, dude, but they spoke Arabic. But I think, I don't know, they came like from Maghreb countries, I don't know. And they were saying, so the police officer said, where are you from? I'm like, Syria. Because the Syrians, they were getting good treatments. They were the Syrians, they were like the sufferers, you know? And I just looked at him and he was like, he was a black dude. And in Syria, we don't have black dudes, dude. Like, we do have like brown people, but we don't have black dudes. It's like, sure, you can find few, but like, it was not the accent, nothing. Like, I know he's not Syrian. And then they said, which city? And I asked him and he was like, you're Syrian, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, what is the capital? I was like, Damascus. And then he said, tell her Damascus. And that was insane. That was like some random guy translating for another more random guy.
And this being taken as fact by the German authorities.
No, that was in Hungary, basically. And those guys, there were a bunch of them. There was like guys from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and they were like from Iran and so on. They were on the way, basically just claiming to be Syrians. And because there was no proper process to kind of like basically see, they were just like being given, like residencies and asylum without even knowing where they are from.
Yeah.
So for me, as a person who's like security for him was like a big deal, I was like, I didn't feel safe, like, sure, like take on the Syrians or whatever, take on whoever, like, and take them on, but just like do what due diligence, know what they are from, make sure that you have their papers, you have like at least their identity, it's their background. And I think Merkel did the mistake exactly in that point. She overwhelmed the system.
What do you think when a Syrian migrant or a Syrian refugee commits a crime in Germany? And there've been quite a few of them, right? Mass stabbings, sexual violence. There has been
It's a very good question.
there's an overrepresentation of certainly of Afghans. Afghans are very high up there when it comes to sexual violence. And unfortunately, you're Syrian. There is an overrepresentation of Syrians.
We're doing quite well on that ranking.
How does that make you feel?
I don't really care about that. I mean, if you go back to 2016, about what happened at the Cologne train station, where there was like over 1,000 sexual harassments reported, that was disturbing. That was very disturbing, because sexual harassment in Syria is something that is way too extreme. It's like a terrorist attack. And seeing those people coming here, and basically whether they are from Syria or other places, doesn't matter. But seeing people basically, from our perspectives, like committing a terrorist attack, in Syria, because this is not cultural in Syria, because like Islam is like a lot more conservative than Europe and so on. But those people, they were seeing the women as I don't know, like free good. They can touch, they can do whatever, only because she was walking freely. She's basically like, they consider that she's asking for it. So your question is basically, when a Syrian commits a crime, it's exactly the same standard as when any other person commits a crime. But I do think that the range of actions for European, like let's say if you have a disturbed European, so let's say that's like they are everywhere in every country.
Of course.
So there's like a range of things usually they do. They get alcoholic, they land on the street, they become homeless, they beat somebody up, they go in the club, they cause some trouble. Now this is the range of the European. They might want to, I don't know, beat up their wife, whatever. But the problem is when you bring somebody from another country, they have like a wider range, because the country is less civilized. They have like just different culture, whatever. People pull out the knife.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the problem. Is basically, if usually they justify this, he had mental issues. Well, it's absolutely true. He went on and stabbed quite few people because he had mental issues. But if he wasn't European having mental issues, what would be his range of action? What would come into his consideration? Here, not to play down all the right-wing attacks in Germany. Basically, also like there were stabbing, shootings, and so on, including on Jews, on Muslims, and so on. So I just think that the culture, or like people would have learned, there is a range of actions that you can do when you're disturbed. And I think there is a wider one when people are coming from less civilized countries.
So would you agree that if you were to bring 1 million people from Syria, many of them suffering PTSD, that generally speaking, that would make the country that they come to less safe?
100%. Especially in the form that happened. I do think that the fact that the German army is not on the streets, in my opinion, is surprising. It's surprising. It was like a luck thing, because I think they took on a big bet. Like, how can you imagine just letting in that fashion so many people in a country and expect things to just like, actually things went very well considering like the like what happened and the result. Actually, relatively speaking, things went way too well, to be honest.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Like, in some ways, one could have expected it to go much worse.
Exactly. And that's, I think, because I do think that many of the Syrians, many of the people that have arrived, they were genuinely in need of help. But that doesn't justify the fact that you can basically, I think the job of a politician is basically to protect the people, to like act in the best of their interest. It's not the job. And I think Merkel acted emotionally in that aspect, although I am somebody who profited from that. I think Merkel at that time acted emotionally, and that wasn't her job.
So how many people do you think that have come into Europe are like you?
I would say we are quite as much of a minority as the ones who are like, I think there's like a common thing, like people on the right and on the left. So on the left, they take people like me and say, look, guys, probably the left not anymore after me speaking right now. But
the left finds a few good examples. They go, look, everyone's like this one.
They find an ABD who has a job, who speaks perfect German, who's whatever. And it's like, there we go. That's the
success story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you on the other side, the right wing, basically, you do like to basically selective truth telling. Basically, what you tell, you don't lie, but you do select what you tell. That basically goes into the other minority. But I do think that the majority of the people are something in between. They are not on the extreme, like with any like normal like country. So I do think that the majority of the people do appreciate the fact that they are in Germany. They do appreciate the fact that they are safe right now and so on, and they are trying their best. Maybe their best is not enough. That could be the case. Or other people, they just don't feel compatible. They're just like unready to give up like some of their original beliefs, which also understandable. I just think that you should go on with your life elsewhere.
Would you want to return to Syria?
No.
Why not?
Because that's a good question. Because because obviously Germany is a better country, Europe is a better country. I feel a lot more identify with the German values. I obey by the constitution. I do believe that women and men are equal, not same but equal. I do believe that everybody in the country should live peacefully with everyone else, whether it's like because of religion, political belief, sexual orientation, their physical appearance or whatever. And I don't think these things are basically applicable in Syria. And on top of that, obviously, the economic opportunity here is a lot better.
But you feel Syrian?
Not really. I don't feel Arab generally. And that's basically... No. I don't really feel that Syrian or Arab, which is something I think it's also an interesting thing to address, is when you're asking people to integrate themselves in a new society and you think you are doing them a favor, you're literally asking them to give up their original identity.
Of course.
And when I came to, initially, the first time I visited Berlin, I went there with like 2 German friends, and they wanted to show me like where you got like this Arab falafel and all the good food, and there was like an area full of Arabs, like that Zonan alley. And I went there. I was like, the first time I was like just looking, I was like felt in Syria. I was like, what's going on here? Why like there's such a big collection of people in one place? Like why those people are just like not integrated in the society, and just like maybe occasionally you see someone that looks Arab, you know? And that looked very alarming to me. Like why those people, it looked like an isolation. It looks like a camp for refugees. But like was just like one of Berlin streets. And in that second, I decided I don't want to be here. I believe that the best of opportunities I can get living with the Germans, being with the Germans. I am here in Germany, and I want to learn their language, and I will never end up hanging out here. I literally always made sure throughout the years I lived in Berlin, if I ever go to that street, I go there because there is to eat, because that's where you get good Arabic food, and that's it.
You would be a supporter of having restrictive immigration policies?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Except for yourself.
Yeah. I always say, when I arrived at the German border, I wanted to close the door behind me and say, we're full. Just like, sorry, dude. I've become the bouncer of Germany. It's like, perfect job for an Arab.
No, but I know we're laughing, but it's a serious point, right?
100%. I do think that people went on. So let's consider the German perspective, what the Germans actually agreed to. I don't think Merkel acted wrong as a politician, but I think she did represent the will of the people throughout basically like 2015, 2016. And if you go back to those times, they were like basically pictures coming from the Russian bombardment on Aleppo. There was basically the siege of Baba Amr, the siege of Al-Ghouta. The children that they had, like you could see their chest bones. They were eating cats. And that basically has created an emotional momentum for people to say, we want to act. And Germany is a country that is, I think it's a lot wealthier. It's like one of the wealthiest countries on earth.
100%.
They do have the economical capacity. And I don't think this harmed Germany so much economically. Like, let's see, considering the size of the economy and so on.
I would disagree. I would actually strongly disagree on that. I would argue that economically, I think that the mass migration or the mass arrival of refugees, however perspective you want to look at it from, I think has been a massive net drag on the German economy, on German culture, on German education, on German healthcare, on the German job market. I think that it has damaged every single facet. Again, I'm talking about the mass of people, not as you as an individual. I really don't want this conversation for you to feel like I'm bashing you, because I'm really not. I think every single facet of German life has been impoverished by the mass arrival of people from the global south or third world countries, however you want to look at it. Every single one.
I do agree with you, and that is basically an initial price. There is a different way to calculate that. So basically, to have a German become a taxpayer,
sure,
you will have to get them basically up to their 30, almost like more or less 25 to 30. Education, childcare, everything, all the costs connected with that. While if you get like a Syrian refugee, whatever, you could pay like their language education, their sometime to integrate, like in the not very ideal cases, but like in an average case, let's say 2-3 years, and there you have a taxpayer. The only difference here is basically if people would they come here, if they have an initial full access to the social welfare state, and that is very problematic because that makes people lazy. Absolutely, it will make me lazy. It will make everybody lazy if you just like had money flooding to your account every month. And if you don't get that message across, basically limiting the access to the welfare state, you will be getting problems. And this is Germany, exactly what was Germany getting. I think it's a German-made problem that I think there were many people coming into Germany. They definitely had the capacity. And also they would have been a lot more useful to Germany if Germans would have taken it a step further and said, okay, all humans are the same. Which Germans, they love that. All humans are the same. We have to treat everybody the same. But maybe when it comes to money, we have to be a little restrictive. They have to be a lot more restrictive. You cannot just treat them like the Germans. It's just like, I think, because actually from my knowledge, in the German law, you can see everywhere, that when the state provides something, they say it's for the German men and women plus refugees. And then like another section comes, European must do this and this and this. So actually being a refugee is a lot than being a European in Germany. Is a lot better because you are set basically on the same level with Germans. So I think it's a German-made problem. It's not an immigration problem.
Here we agree again.
Yeah.
I think that the mass arrival of migrants and refugees to Europe is absolutely the fault of Europeans and not the fault of the migrants and refugees who've arrived. This I 100% agree on. It's the fault of European elites, and it's the fault of the system that the system wasn't designed to better essentially. I think, for example, the United Arab Emirates solves the problem of mass migration by you will not receive access to citizenship. You will never be able to vote in the UAE.
I think that is
you
problematic.
come, you work, and if you don't work, you're sent back home.
Yeah, I do think that basically not providing access to citizenship is gonna create like some social segregation generally. I don't think that should be as easy as now in Germany, right? Because they've eased the citizenship law by way too much. I think if you're like just speaking basic German, you could pass, you can become a German, and that's ununderstandable for me. Like it's also, I don't like it. It's
but don't
threatening.
you think that citizenship, don't you think that belonging to a country is more than just a piece of paper? If I moved to Syria and spent 10 years in Syria and I spoke Arabic, I wouldn't be Syrian. I would still be a Polish South African.
Yeah, but I don't think that citizenship is the definition of like your exact place of birth and your race. I do think that citizenship nowadays should have a broader definition, is people who are committed to the country, who love the country, who are committed to the basic values of the country, and who have demonstrated that, and not just by words.
But the problem is Europe seems to be giving citizenships to people who don't fit
That's
that
an implementation
criteria.
problem.
I really think it's very visible in the United Kingdom. It's certainly very visible in France. And what's worse, the data appears to reflect that second and third generation migrants, right? So people born in France, this is especially visible with Maghreb, the descendants of Maghreb migrants in the second and third generation are much more radical than their parents or grandparents who arrived from Morocco, Tunisia, or Algeria to France. They're more radical, they're more likely to be Islamists. And the data suggests that they haven't, even though they are now French, they're French citizens, they've not spent significant amounts of time in the Maghreb, they still do not seem to like France very much.
That's true, and I do think it's not a concept problem, so concept versus implementation. So I do think that people who are committed to the country by like different measures, they should be granted citizenship. Otherwise, you will not get people as committed to the country as you might like to. I think there's a lot of talented people that you do want them to stay in the country, that they basically just like have their full commitment. They can settle in the country, they can have family and so on. You can't just like stay in a country like, for example, like Qatar for 25 years and never become a citizen. You're just providing for the country all for your entire life, and out of the sudden just cancel your visa for whatever reason and then you're out. I think it's unfair. But on the implementation issue here, what we see in Europe is that people that are like not fully integrated, that have not demonstrated their agreement by actions to the constitutional values, this is a very problematic thing. And I mean by constitutional values, I mean people must understand that the separation between the state and religion, they must demonstrate that, they must demonstrate good language knowledge, that they are ready, they pay taxes and so on. And that is over a large, basically over long term, and not just basically a momentary thing. It was funny because like when I did the citizenship, it was like, do you recognize the constitution and whatever? And I said yes, and I could be a terrorist, dude. I could be just like fucking somebody, like going harassing girls every day. I was like just taking a second just to get the passports. Like, yeah, I do. And then after that, you just get the full access. It's stupid. It degrades the actual value of it. Because to me right now, seeing that another guy who would come and get it, it kind of degrades the value of my work that I have done.
Are you proud of the citizenship that you have?
Not proud. I think it's pretty convenient. I do love Germany. I do feel a lot more identified with Germany than Syria, because like I said, Germany is a tolerant place across the board. I do believe that women should have when they inherit something from their fathers or mothers, when they die, they should get equally like the man. In Syria, it's not the case. Basically, every woman gets half the part as a man. And I think there is a lot of unfair things. And that's why I cannot define myself. Like I cannot identify myself with Syria. So I love Germany, and I'm happy that I have the passport. But yeah, to be honest, I sometimes that's a identity crisis here. But I don't feel Syrian nor actual German. I just think I feel like ABD, and that's good enough for now.
Thank you, ABD.
Thank you.
It's a very nice conversation. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.